Hey everyone, this is my second attempt to do this. This one won't be going out live. I realized I wasn't live for after reading multiple chapters of the Bible. So once again, I'm going to start again. We're reading from 1 Samuel 28 and we're going to read about Saul and David. So let's pick it up where we left off last night. And let's see what we can learn here. I will post this as soon as it's finished as well. All right, so starting again, we see from last night, David had fled to the Philistines. He'd fled to the enemy's territory. Now, he'd fled to the enemy's territory, which is quite interesting because there's no real sense of this relationship between them. There's no real sense of why this would be a good idea. But David also, it says he's fled here because he believes that Saul would stop pursuing him. And that's exactly what happened, because it says, Saul will despair. It says, there is nothing better for me than that I should escape to the land of the Philistines. And Saul will despair of seeking me any longer within the borders of Israel, and I shall escape out of his hand. And what happens? It says here, David arose, he went over with 600 men, his wives, all his family. And when it was told of Saul that David had fled to Gath, he no longer sought him. So for the second time, Saul is seeking after David's life. And in this instance, he's given up. So we see David now, he's in the city of Gath, which is the home of Goliath. It's also the home of the other giants as well. And we see that once again, this is the city where the ark was captured and so forth, and the curse had come upon the people. So it's quite a rich history by this stage of the events that had happened with God, and we see that here David has fled there to avoid this, being killed by Saul and being chased by Saul, pursued by him. So let's start reading. So Saul and the medium of Endor. Now, we know that mediums are sorcery, they're witchcraft, they're wicked. We're not supposed to be playing or tinkering with mediums or going and doing these sort of things. But we see Saul's desperation here in this passage. He's desperate to seek answers and to inquire of God, because he can't hear from him anymore. And because he can't hear from him anymore, he's certainly desperate too. So, all right, we see here, in those days, the Philistines gathered their forces for war to fight against Israel. And Ashish said to David, understand that you and your men are to go out with me in the army. David said to Ashish, very well, you shall know what your servant can do. And Ashish said to David, very well, I will make you my bodyguard for life. So Ashish has taken David, and he sees David as blameless before him. So there's nothing in Ashish's sight that has caused him to not trust David. Now Samuel had died, and all Israel had mourned for him and buried him in Ramah, his own city. And Saul had put the mediums and the necromancers out of the land, obviously because it was wicked. The Philistines assembled and came and encamped at Shunem. And Saul gathered all Israel, and they encamped at Gilboa. When Saul saw the army of the Philistines, I'm going to try to get it right, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. And when Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him, either by dreams or by Urim or by prophets. Then Saul said to his servants, seek out for me a woman who is a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her. And his servants said to him, behold, there is a medium at Endor. So Saul disguised himself and put on other garments and went, he and 2 men with him. And they came to the woman by night. And he said, divine for me by a spirit, and bring up for me whomever I shall name to you. The woman said to him, surely you know what Saul has done. Now he has cut off the mediums and the necromancers from the land. Why then are you laying a trap for my life to bring about my death? Okay, it seems like, well, he's kicked out all the mediums, and now here he is seeking one. But Saul swore to her by the Lord, as the Lord lives, so he swears an oath to a medium. And swears, as the Lord lives, no punishment shall come upon you for this thing. Okay, but then the woman said, whom shall I bring up for you? So there's multiple things here we're going to point out that seem to happen that, swearing an oath before a medium in God's name, for one, that's the first one. Whom shall I bring up for you? He said, bring up Samuel for me. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice, and the woman said to Saul, why have you deceived me? You are Saul. The king said to her, do not be afraid. What do you see? And the woman said to Saul, I see a god coming up out of the earth, lower G. He said to her, what is his appearance? And she said, an old man is coming up and he's wrapped in a robe. And Saul knew that it was Samuel, and he bowed with his face to the ground and paid homage. Then Samuel said to Saul, why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? Saul answered, I am in great distress, for the Philistines are warring against me, and God has turned away from me and answers me no more, either by prophets or by dreams. Okay, so this is problem number 2, is that when the dead are dead, they stay dead. And we see in the Bible that we're not to mess with, trying to speak to the dead and so forth. So because what we're promised is that if we see somebody who is actually the dead, right? Like, so we see someone we know who's died and we speak to them, it's a familiar spirit that we're talking to. All right, and that familiar spirit is a demonic spirit, or a demonic entity, if you will. So therefore, if this were to happen, you just see your loved ones and they've died, and you're talking to them in dreams, that's a familiar spirit. It's not them. Once they're dead, they go, right? They're not lingering here in this world. That's a complete and utter lie. Now, the evil spirits, the demonic spirits, are lingering here. That's why they harass you, is that they're lingered here until the time of the end. And we see that they're the reason, like, Satan, obviously, he controls them, but they're the reason why people are so messed up in this world, is because there are all these different demonic spirits around. And so these demons basically are everywhere, and as soon as we open a door to them, in they come. And therefore, that's the real thing to understand here. So he is communicating, and it says in the Bible here that he's communicating to actual Samuel. It doesn't say it's a familiar spirit, but once again, this would not be something you would ever want to do. Therefore I have summoned you to tell me what I shall do. And Samuel says, why then do you ask me, since the Lord has turned from you and become your enemy? The Lord has done to you as he spoke by me, for the Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand and given it to your neighbor David. Because you did not obey the voice of the Lord and did not carry out his fierce wrath against Amalek, therefore the Lord has done this thing to you this day. Moreover, the Lord will give Israel also with you into the hand of the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons shall be with me. The Lord will give the army of Israel and also into the hand of the Philistines. Okay, so once again, there's something interesting that we see here, is that he's saying that you and your sons will be with me. Even though Saul has been given away from, God's turned away from him and so forth, it doesn't say that you'll be in hell. It says you'll be with me, which I find quite interesting. I won't really say much further on that, but it could just be, referencing that you'll be dead, or you'll be sleeping is what it could just mean. But ultimately, we know that there's Abraham's side where the righteous go when they die, and then there's obviously Sheol, which is where the unrighteous go when they die. Then Saul fell at once full length on the ground, filled with fear because of the words of Samuel. Okay, so this time it sunk in, and there was no strength in him, for he had eaten nothing all day and all night. And the woman came to Saul, and when she saw that he was terrified, she said to him, behold, your servant has obeyed you. I have taken my life in my hand and have listened to what you have said to me. Now therefore you also obey your servant. Let me settle a morsel of bread. So this is the problem, all right here. And whether it's intentional or not, this is the problem. There's a medium and a sorcerer, and now she's telling the king, you obey me now, all right? And she's trying to get him to enter into a covenant of some sort. Let me settle a morsel of bread before you and eat, that you may have strength when you go on your way. Might seem like kindness, but once again, it's like those dreams. If you have a dream of food and the enemy's trying to feed you, they're trying to get you to enter into a covenant or agree with them. He refused and said, I will not eat. But his servants together with the woman urged him, and he listened to their words. So he rose from the earth and sat on the bed. Now the woman had a fattened calf in the house, and she quickly killed it, and she took flour and kneaded it and baked unleavened bread of it. She put it before Saul and his servants, and they ate. Then they rose and went away that night. So this could be something that would lead to a curse falling upon you. And whether that's the passage is intentional to imply about, not eating at the table of your enemies, trying to eat at the table of God and eat at the table of your enemies or not, I'm not sure. But ultimately, if you were reading this from a spiritual perspective and you look at this, you would not accept this food from a necromancer or a medium or anyone doing witchcraft or so forth. It would be dangerous. That wouldn't be right. The Philistines reject David. Now the Philistines had gathered all their forces at Aphek, and the Israelites were encamped by the spring that is in Jezreel. As the lords of the Philistines were passing on by hundreds and by thousands, and David and his men were passing on in the rear with Ashish, the commanders of the Philistines said, What are these Hebrews doing here? And Ashish said to the commanders of the Philistines, Is this not David, the servant of Saul, king of Israel, who has been with me now for days and years, since he deserted to me? I found no fault in him to this day. But the commanders of the Philistines were angry with him. And the commanders of the Philistines said to him, Send the man back that he may return to the place to which you have assigned him. He shall not go down with us to battle, lest in the battle he becomes an adversary to us. For how could this fellow reconcile himself to his Lord? Would he not be with the heads of the men here? Is not this David of whom they sing to one another in dances? Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. Then Ashish called David and said to him, As the Lord lives, you have been honest, and to me it seems right that you should march out and in with me in the campaign. For I have found nothing wrong with you in the day of your coming to me this day. Nevertheless, the lords do not approve of you. So go back now and go peaceably, that you may not displease the lords of the Philistines. And David said to Ashish, But what have I done? And what have you found in your servant from the day I entered your service until now, that I may not go and fight against the enemies of the Lord my king? And Ashish answered David and said, I know that you are blameless in my sight as an angel of God. Nevertheless, the commanders of the Philistines have said, He shall not go up with us to the battle. Okay, so they're worried about him going up to the battle, lest he's going to turn on them. Now, then rise early in the morning with the servants of your Lord who came with you, and start early in the morning, and depart as soon as you have light. So David set out with his men early in the morning to return to the land of the Philistines. But the Philistines went up to Jezreel. Okay, so they don't want to fight with him. They don't know if he's going to turn on them, if he's going to attack them. Ashish trusts him, but they don't. David's wives are captured. Now when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day, remember the city that he was given by Ashish, the Amalekites had made a raid against the Negeb and against Ziklag. They had overcome Ziklag and burned it with fire, and taken captive the women and all who were in it, both small and great. They killed no one, but carried them off and went their way. And when David and his men came to the city, they found it burned with fire, and their wives and their sons and daughters taken captive. And David and the people who were with him raised their voices and wept until they had no more strength to weep. David's two wives also had been taken captive, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail the widow of Nabal of Carmel. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because all the people were bitter in soul, each for his sons and daughters. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. And David said to Abiathar the priest, the son of Ahimelech, Bring me the ephod. So Abiathar brought the ephod to David. And David inquired of the Lord, Shall I pursue after this band? Shall I overtake them? He answered him, Pursue, for you shall surely overtake, and shall surely rescue. So David set out, and the 600 men who were with him, and they came to the brook Besor, where those who were left behind stayed. But David pursued, he and 400 men. 200 stayed behind, and who were too exhausted to cross the brook Besor. They found an Egyptian in the open country and brought him to David, and they gave him bread and he ate. They gave him water to drink, and they gave him a piece of cake of figs and 2 clusters of raisins. And when he had eaten, his spirit revived. for he had not eaten bread or drunk water for 3 days and 3 nights. And David said to him, "To whom do you belong? And where are you from?" He said, "I am a young man of Egypt, servant to an Amalekite, and my master left me behind because I fell sick 3 days ago. We had made a raid against the Negeb of the Cherethites and against that which belongs to Judah, and against the Negeb of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag with fire." And David said to him, "Will you take me down to this band?" And he said, "Swear to me by God that you will not kill me or deliver me into the hands of my master, and I'll take you down to this band." So going back here, they find this Egyptian, and this Egyptian they show, we see in the story of Abigail and Nabal, right? Nabal was literally a rich man, and he was a wealthy man. And we're reading about this last night. He was unwilling to love anyone, his neighbor or anyone, to be generous or kind to anybody. And we see that with him. He had great wealth, but he ended up having a feast on his own and getting drunk on his own. And he wouldn't recognize David at all. He said, "Who are you?" So he's not willing to help a stranger. But here we see David and his men. They find this man, and even though he's the enemy, they don't just slay him. They don't threaten him. Instead they give him water and bread, right? They give him bread and water, and they give him cakes of figs and raisins to eat. So they give him food. And it turns out he hasn't eaten in 3 days. And so he says, "As long as you don't turn me into my master," right? Because if my master knows that I've shown you the way here, he'll kill me anyway. And so they have mercy on him. David defeats the Amalekites. And when he had taken him down, behold, they were spread abroad over all the land, eating and drinking and dancing, because of all the great spoil they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from the land of Judah. And David struck them down from twilight until evening, so 6 p.m. until the evening of the next day, so 24 hours. And not a man of them escaped, except 400 young men who mounted camels and fled. It's interesting it says that. It says, not a man escaped, but 400. That 400 got away. But I think what it's saying is that, he didn't allow anyone to escape, as in, he was just killing everybody. And then these 400 managed to get away. It's just the way in which it says it. Now it says, not a man escaped, but then 400. So, which is a large number, but I think it's just the way it translates into English. I think that's what's going on here. David recovered all that the Amalekites had taken, and David rescued his 2 wives. Nothing was missing except whether small or great, sons and daughters, spoil or anything that had been taken. David brought back all. David also captured all the flocks and herds, and the people drove the livestock before him, and said, "This is David's spoil." Then David came to the 200 men who had been too exhausted to follow David, and who had been left at the brook Besor. And there they went out to meet David and to meet the people who were with him. And when David came near to the people and he greeted them, then all the wicked and worthless fellows among the men who had gone with David said, "Because they did not go with us, we will not give them any of the spoil that we have recovered, except that each man may lead away his wife and children and depart." But David said, "You shall not do so, my brothers, with what the Lord has given us. He has preserved us and given into our hand the band that came against us. Who will listen to you in this matter?" So let's go back. So he says, he took the 200 men. They'd been too exhausted. And they went to meet him. And it says, then all the wicked and worthless fellows among the men who had gone with David said, "Because they did not go with us, we will not give them any of the spoil." Okay, so once again, what he's saying is that, there are men that David went with, and in their hearts, they're like, it's mine, it's ours. Like, they're being greedy, right? They're saying, well, they don't deserve any because they didn't come with us. But they were in the battle too. They just were exhausted. And David said, "You shall not do so, my brothers, with what the Lord has given us. He has preserved us and given into our hand the band that came against us." So ultimately, who would listen to you in this matter? Well, as his share is who goes down into the battle, so shall his share be who stays by the baggage. They shall share alike. Okay, it's like how Jesus commands the one wage working in the vineyard. And he made it a statute and a rule for Israel from that day forward to this day. When David came to Ziklag, he sent part of the spoil to his friends, the elders of Judah, saying, Here is a present for you from the spoil of the enemies of the Lord. It was for those in Bethel, in Ramoth, in the Negeb, in Utir, in Arir, and Shipmoth, in Eshtemoa, in Rachel, in the cities of the Jerahmeelites, in the cities of the Kenites, in Hormah, in Bor Ashan, in Atak, in Hebron, for all the places where David and his men had roamed. Okay, so there was so much spoil here, and he gave all this spoil to all these locations. All right, so we come to now a really difficult part of the story, and it's the reality of Saul's death. So it's the coming of the conclusion of what happened from his disobedience. Now the Philistines were fighting against Israel, and the men of Israel fled before the Philistines and fell slain on Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines overtook Saul and his sons. And the Philistines struck down Jonathan and Abinadab and Malchishua, the sons of Saul. The battle pressed hard against Saul, and the archers found him. And he was badly wounded by the archers. Then Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and thrust me through with it, lest these uncircumcised come and thrust me through or mistreat me." But his armor-bearer would not, for he feared greatly. Therefore Saul took his own sword and fell upon it. And when his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he also fell upon his sword and died with him. Thus Saul died, and his 3 sons and his armor-bearer and all his men on the same day together. So everyone in Saul's camp died. And when the men of Israel who were on the other side of the valley and those beyond the Jordan saw that the men of Israel had fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they abandoned their cities and fled. And the Philistines came and lived in them. Okay, so once again, they see their king's dead, and it's not good. They don't have a leader anymore. The next day when the Philistines came to strip the slain, they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. So they cut off his head and stripped off his armor and sent messengers throughout the land of the Philistines to carry the good news to the house of their idols and to the people. They put his armor in the temple of Ashtaroth, which is one of their gods, and they fastened his body to the wall of Beth-shan. But when the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant men arose and went all night and took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Beth-shan. They came to Jabesh and burned them there. And they took their bones and buried them under the tamarisk tree in Jabesh and fasted 7 days. Obviously, they were touching dead bodies. They were obviously spiritually unclean or ritually unclean and so forth. We know the tamarisk tree. We see Saul seated under the tamarisk tree multiple times in his story. It's like he's where he would go to obviously think and other things. So let's continue a little bit now into 2 Samuel, because we've only just started reading. And let's just continue on now. So David hears of Saul's death. Before I do, I'm just going to put my heater on in here. I'll put a jacket on. It's getting quite cold. So I'll just pause for 1 minute and then I'll come back. All right, I'm back. Here we go. 2 Samuel, verse 1. David hears of Saul's death. After the death of Saul, when David had returned from striking down the Amalekites, David remained 2 days in Ziklag. And on the 3rd day, behold, a man came from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dirt on his head. And when he came to David, he fell to the ground and paid homage. David said to him, "Where do you come from?" And he said to him, "I have escaped from the camp of Israel." And David said to him, "How did it go? Tell me." And he answered, "The people fled from the battle, and also many of the people have fallen and are dead. And Saul and his son Jonathan are also dead." And David said to the young man who told him, "How do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are dead?" And the young man who told him said, "By chance I happened to be on Mount Gilboa, And there was Saul leaning on his spear, and behold, the chariots and the horsemen were close upon him. And when he looked behind him, he saw me and called to me, and I answered, Here I am. And he said to me, Who are you? I answered, I am an Amalekite. And he said to me, Stand beside me and kill me, for anguish has seized me, and yet my life still lingers. So I stood beside him and killed him, because I was sure that he could not live after he had fallen. And I took the crown that was on his head and the armlet that was on his arm, and I brought them here to my Lord. And David took hold of his clothes and tore them, and so did all the men who were with him. And they mourned and wept and fasted until evening for Saul and for Jonathan his son, and for the people of the Lord and for the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. And David said to the young man who told him, Where do you come from? And he answered, I am a son of a sojourner, an Amalekite. David said to him, How is it you were not afraid to put your hand out to destroy the Lord's anointed? And now this is where the man becomes entrapped in his own lies. Okay, so this man's seeking glory from the king, or glory from David, obviously, knowing that Saul's fallen and he's come with his tale, but it's backfired against him. And David called one of the young men and said, Go execute him. And he struck him down so that he died. And David said to him, Your blood be on your head, for your own mouth has testified against you, saying, I have killed the Lord's anointed. All right, so once again, David, we see here, he stands firm on, on what he personally believed, and when he wouldn't touch Saul, he wouldn't kill Saul. And we see that deep in his heart, he would never take the life of somebody that God had ordained. David laments for Saul and Jonathan, and David lamented with this lamentation over Saul and Jonathan his son. And he said it should be taught to the people of Judah. Behold, it is written in the book of Yasher. Now, we understand the book of Yasher is in the Apocrypha, so books removed from the Bible, Apocrypha. Okay, so during the Reformation in the 16th century, it says here, these books were removed. It was over this whole canonization thing and the desire to reduce printing costs, reading their omission in many Bibles. Okay, should be able to get here. I don't like using this, but it's just going to help us to... hopefully it shows the book of Enoch. There's a number of them. It shows, it's not going to show them. Yeah, the 14 books. Here we go. This one probably shows. You can buy actually these books. You can buy these all in one. I had them at one stage. Yeah, so Tobit, Judith. No, not Esther. No, it's not those. Oh yeah, Baruch, Bel and the Dragon, Perez, Manasseh, Maccabees, Esdras. We see Enoch, and they're not here in this list for some reason. Anyway, I have to find another list. Leave that with me, and I'll find a list of that. Okay, so this is the song, and it comes from the book of Yasher. So we see the book of Enoch is also referenced as well. Your glory, O Israel, is slain on your high places. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath. Publish it not in the streets of Ashkelon. Lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice. Lest the daughters of the uncircumcised exult. You mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew or rain upon you, nor fields of offerings. For there the shield and the mighty was defiled, the shield of Saul not anointed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan turned not back, and the sword of Saul returned not empty. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and lovely, in life and in death they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles, they were stronger than lions. You daughters of Israel wept over Saul, who clothed you luxuriously in scarlet, who put ornaments of gold on your apparel. How the mighty have fallen in the midst of the battle. Jonathan lies slain on your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. Very pleasant have you been to me. Your love to me was extraordinary, surpassing the love of women. How the mighty have fallen, and the weapons of war perished. David anointed king of Judah. After this, David inquired, and before that, let me just say this, is about Jonathan. We see this great friendship was so close with him. He even says, your love was surpassing the love of women. So the love for his friend was so great. But his friend sided with his father at the end of the day. His friend chose to follow in the ways of Saul and chose to fight in the battle with him. David anointed king of Judah. After this, David inquired of the Lord, shall I go up into any of the cities of Judah? And the Lord said to him, go up. David said, to which shall I go up? And he said, to Hebron. So David went up there, and his two wives, also Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal and Carmel. And David brought up his men who were with him, everyone with his household, and they lived in the towns of Hebron. And the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. When they told David it was the men of Jabesh Gilead who buried Saul, David sent messages to the men of Jabesh Gilead and said to them, may you be blessed by the Lord, because you showed this loyalty to Saul your Lord and buried him. Now may the Lord show steadfast love and faithfulness to you, and I'll do good to you because you have done this thing. Now therefore let your hands be strong and be valiant, for Saul your Lord is dead, and the house of Judah has anointed me king over them. Ishbosheth made king of Israel. But Abner the son of Ner, commander of Saul's army, took Ishbosheth the son of Saul and brought him over to Mahanaim, and he made him king over Gilead, and the Asherites and Jezreel, and Ephraim and Benjamin and all Israel. So we see Abner has made this decision, not God. Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel, and he reigned 2 years. But the house of Judah followed David. And the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. The Battle of Gibeon. Abner the son of Ner and the servants of Ishbosheth the son of Saul went out from Mahanaim to Gibeon. And Joab the son of Zeruiah and the servants of David went out to meet them at the pool of Gibeon. And they sat down, one on the other side of the pool and one on the other side of the pool. And Abner said to Joab, let the young men arise and compete before us. And Joab said, let them arise. Then they arose and passed over by number 12 for Benjamin and Ishbosheth the son of Saul, and 12 for the servants of David. And each caught his opponent by the head and thrust his sword in his opponent's side. So they fell down together. Therefore that place was called Helkath Hazarim, which is a Gibeon. And the battle was very fierce that day. And Abner and the men of Israel were beaten before the servants of David. Okay, so David's men won. And the three sons of Zeruiah were there, Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Now Asahel was as swift of foot as a wild gazelle. And Asahel pursued Abner, and as he went, he turned neither to the right hand nor to the left from following Abner. And Abner looked at him and said, is that you, Asahel? And he answered, it is I. He's obviously riding. Abner said to him, turn aside to your right hand or to your left, and seize one of the young men and take his spoil. But Asahel would not turn aside from following him. So Abner's warning him, don't follow me or I'll kill you, right? And so we go back here. It says, does it say who Asahel? He's the brother of Joab, I think. But Asahel would not turn aside from following him. And Abner said, turn aside from following me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How then I could lift my face up to your brother Joab? There we go. So it's Joab's brothers following him. But he refused to turn aside. Therefore Abner struck him in the stomach with the butt of his spear, so that the spear came out at his back. Okay, so he hit him really hard with the spear, and it literally just went straight through him. And it was the butt of his spear, the back, the unsharpened part. Okay, so he fell there and died where he was. So he's just killed Joab's brother. So Abner was loyal to the house of Saul. He's the commander of the army of the house of Saul. Joab is the commander of the army of David, David's army. And all who came to the place where Asahel had fallen and died stood still. But Joab and Abishai pursued Abner, And as the sun was going down, they came to the hill of Amar, which lies before Giah on the way to the wilderness of Gibeon. So I don't think they've realized that Joab's realized his brother's dead yet. And the people of Benjamin gathered themselves together behind Abner and became one group and took their stand on top of the hill. Then Abner called to Joab, "Shall the sword devour forever? Do you not know that the end will be bitter? How long will it be before you tell your people to turn from the pursuit of their brothers?" And Joab said, "As God lives, if you had not spoken, surely the men would not have given up the pursuit of their brothers until the morning." So Joab blew the trumpet, and all the men stopped and pursued Israel no more, nor did they fight any more. And Abner and his men went all that night through the Arabah. They crossed the Jordan, and marching the whole morning they came to Mahanaim. Joab returned from the pursuit of Abner, and when he had gathered all the people together, there were missing from David's servants 19 men, besides Asahel, his brother. So Joab doesn't know. He's made an agreement with Abner just to abandon the chase and to, peace almost. And now he's just coming to realize that Abner's killed his brother. But the servants of David had struck down at Benjamin 360 of Abner's men. And they took up Asahel and buried him in the tomb of his father, which was at Bethlehem. And Joab and his men marched all night, and the day broke upon them at Hebron. Now we talk about this story because later we see that this battle between Joab and Abner, where it happens, it's not long after this actually. All right, Abner joins David. There was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. And David grew stronger and stronger, while the house of Saul became weaker and weaker. And sons were born to David at Hebron. His firstborn was Ammon, Ahinoam of Jezreel, and his second Shilab, of Abigail the widow of Nabal, of Carmel, and the third Absalom the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur, and the fourth Adonijah the son of Haggith, and the fifth Shephatiah the son of Abital, and the sixth Ithream of Eglah, David's wife. These were born to David in Hebron. While there was war between the house of Saul and the house of David, Abner was making himself strong in the house of Saul. Now Saul had a concubine, whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Ahah, and Ishbosheth said to Abner, "Why have you gone into my father's concubine?" Then Abner was very angry over the words of Ishbosheth and said, "Am I a dog's head of Judah? To this day I keep showing steadfast love to the house of Saul your father, to his brothers, and to his friends, and have not given you into the hand of David. And yet you charge me today with a fault concerning a woman. God do so to Abner and more also, if I do not accomplish for David what the Lord has sworn to him. Transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and set up the throne of David over Israel and over Judah, from Dan to Beersheba." And Ishbosheth could not answer Abner another word, because he feared him. Okay, so Abner's saying, this is what this is what needs to happen. This kingdom has to be transferred over. And he's saying, why I've been loyal. Why are you charging me with this fault concerning this one thing? And Abner sent messages to David on his behalf, saying, "To whom does the land belong? Make your covenant with me, and behold, my hand shall be with you, to bring over all Israel to you." And he said, "Good, I will make a covenant with you. But one thing I require of you, that is, you shall not see my face unless you first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come to see my face." And David sent messages to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, "Give me my wife, Michal, for whom I paid the bridal price 100 foreskins of the Philistines." He actually gave him 200. And Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband Paltiel, son of Laish. But her husband went with her, weeping after her all the way to Bahurim. Pretty horrible thing, right? He's married to this woman. He's been given, loves his wife. She's obviously very beautiful as well. And now he's had his wife taken and given to another man. But her husband went with her, weeping all the way. This is just devastating. Then Abner said to him, "Go return," and he returned. Then Abner conferred with the elders of Israel, saying, "For some time past you have been seeking David as king over you. Now then bring it about, for the Lord has promised David, saying, By the hand of my servant David I will save my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines, and from the hand of all their enemies." Abner also spoke to Benjamin, and then Abner went to tell David at Hebron all that Israel and the whole house of Benjamin thought good to do. When Abner came with 20 men to David at Hebron, David made a feast for Abner and the men who were with him. And Abner said to David, I will arise and go, and will gather all Israel to my lord the king, that they may make a covenant with you, and you may reign over all that your heart desires. So Abner sent Abner away, and he went in peace. Just then the servants of David arrived with Joab from a raid, bringing much spoil with them. But Abner was not with David at Hebron, for he had sent him away, and he had gone in peace. When Joab and all the army that were with him came, and it was told Joab, Abner the son of Ner came to the king, and he has let him go, and he has gone in peace. Then Joab went to the king and said, What have you done? Behold, Abner came to you. Why is it that you have sent him away so that he is gone? You know that Abner the son of Ner came to deceive you, and to know you're going out and coming in and know what you're doing. So this peace has been made between David and Abner, and Joab isn't aware of it. He doesn't fully understand it, but Joab is bitter about the death of his brother, so he seeks revenge, which is where it all goes wrong here. Joab murders Abner. When Joab came out from David's presence, he sent messengers after Abner, and they brought him back from the cistern of Sarah. But David did not know about it. And when Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside into the midst of the gate to speak with him privately. And there he struck him in the stomach, so that he died for the blood of Asahel, his brother. Afterward, when David heard of it, he said, I and my kingdom are forever guiltless before the Lord for the blood of Abner the son of Ner. May it fall upon the head of Joab and upon all his father's house. And may the house of Joab never be without one who has a discharge, or who is leprous, who holds a spindle or falls by the sword or lacks bread. So Joab and Abishai, his brother, killed Abner, because he had put their brother Asahel to death in the battle of Gibeon. So David mourns Abner. Then David said to Joab and to all the people who were with him, Tear your clothes and put on sackcloth and mourn before Abner. And King David followed the bier, which is the funeral bed. They burned Abner at Hebron. And the king lifted up his voice and wept at the grave of Abner, and all the people wept. And the king lamented for Abner, saying, Should Abner die as a fool dies? Your hands were not bound, your feet were not fettered. As one falls before the wicked, you have fallen. And all the people wept again over him. Then all the people came to persuade David to eat bread while it was yet day. But David swore, saying, God do so to me and more also, if I taste bread or anything else till the sun goes down. And all the people took notice of it, and it pleased them, as everything that the king did pleased all the people. So all the people and all Israel understood that day that it had not been the king's will to put to death Abner, son of Ner. And the king said to his servants, Do you know that a prince and a great man has fallen this day in Israel? And I was gentle today, though anointed king. These men, the son of Zeruiah, are more severe than I. The Lord repay the evildoer according to his wickedness. Ishbosheth murdered. When Ishbosheth Saul's son heard that Abner had died at Hebron, his courage failed, and all Israel were dismayed. Now Saul's son had 2 men who were captains of raiding bands. The name of one was Baanah, the other was Rechab, son of Rimmon, a man of Benjamin from Beeroth. For Beeroth was also counterpart of Benjamin. The Beerothites fled to Gittim and have been sojourners there to this day. Jonathan the son of Saul had a son who was crippled in his feet. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel, and his nurse took him up and fled. And as she fled in a haste, he fell and became lame. And his name was Mephibosheth. Now the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, Rechab, and Baanah set out about the heat of the day, and they came to the house of Ishbosheth as he was taking his noonday rest. They came into the midst of the house as if to get wheat, and they stabbed him in the stomach. And Rechab and Baanah his brother escaped. When they came into the house as he lay on his bed in his bedroom, they struck him and put him to death and beheaded him. They took his head and went out by the way of the Arabah all night, and brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron. And they said to the king, Here is the head of Ishbosheth, son of Saul your enemy, who sought your life. The Lord has avenged my lord, the king, this day on Saul and on his offspring. But David answered, so David has just suffered so much. He's just lost Saul, Jonathan, now he's lost Abner, and now all of a sudden Ishbosheth as well. So David answered Rechab and Baanah his brother, the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, "As the Lord lives, who has redeemed my life out of every adversary, when one told me, 'Behold, Saul is dead,' and thought he was bringing good news, I seized him and killed him at Ziklag, which was the reward I gave him for his news. How much more when wicked men have killed a righteous man? In his own house on his bed shall I not now require his blood at your hand, and destroy you from the earth?" And David commanded his young men, and they killed them and cut off their hands and feet and hanged them beside the pool at Hebron. But they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in the tomb of Abner at Hebron. Okay, so once again, these men, they thought that they were doing something that would please the king, but they didn't make the right decisions, and they murdered an innocent man, a righteous man as well. All right, so after all of this suffering, we see David, it says David anointed king. So when all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, "Behold, we are your bone and flesh. In times past when Saul was king over us, it was you who led out and brought in Israel. And the Lord said to you, 'You shall be shepherd of my people Israel. You shall be prince over Israel.'" So all the elders of Israel came to the king at Hebron, and King David made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years at Hebron. He reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and at Jerusalem he reigned over all Israel and Judah 33 years. And the king and his men went to Jerusalem against the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, who said to David, "You will not come in here, but the blind and the lame will ward you off," thinking David cannot come in here. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, that is the city of David. And David said on that day, "Whoever would strike the Jebusites, let him get up the water shaft to attack the lame and the blind, who are hated by David's soul." Therefore it is said, "The blind and the lame shall not come into the house." And David lived in the stronghold and called it the city of David. And David built the city all around from the Millo inward. And David became greater, for the Lord, the God of hosts, was with him. And Hiram king of Tyre sent messengers to David and cedar trees, also carpenters and masons who built David a house. And David knew that the Lord had established him king over Israel, and when he had exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people Israel. David took more concubines and wives from Jerusalem after he came from Hebron, and more sons and daughters were born to David. And these are the names of those who were born to him in Jerusalem: Shemuel, Shobab, Nathan, Solomon, Ibhar, Elishua, Nepheg, Yaphia, Elisham, Eliada, and Eliphalet. David defeats the Philistines. When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel, all the Philistines went up to search for David. But David heard of it and went down to the stronghold. Now the Philistines had come and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. And David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go up against the Philistines? Will you give them into my hand?" And the Lord said to David, "Go up, for I will certainly give the Philistines in your hand." And David came to Baal Perazim, and David defeated them there. And he said, "The Lord has broken through my enemies before me like a breaking flood." Therefore the name of that place is called Baal Perazim. And the Philistines left their idols there, and David and his men carried them away. And the Philistines came up yet again and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. And when David inquired of the Lord, he said, "You shall not go up. Go around to their rear and come against them opposite the balsam trees. And when you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the balsam trees, then rouse yourself, for then the Lord has gone out before you to strike down the army of the Philistines." And David did as the Lord commanded him, and struck down the Philistines from Geba to Gezer. So how things have turned around in this part of the story, where David was living with the Philistines as this place of refuge to escape from Saul. Now Saul's dead, of course. Things have changed, and we see Ishbosheth, who was the king, who was made king by Abner, has now died. So therefore, there is no king over Israel, and it's David's moment to start to step up as we see this happen. So I'm going to now record the video for the book of Revelation, And so just for time's sake, I'm going to stop reading now. We're just under an hour, and we'll continue potentially reading this evening, in this evening's session. So I'll pause here and we'll pick this up again a bit later. We have read a few passages. I've read a little bit more this morning than we might normally, and probably a bit less talking this morning, of course. But ultimately, hopefully you've enjoyed this read this morning. And if you have, please, make sure you hit the like button and allow us to get this out to more people to hear. And yeah, just have a wonderful day in Christ, and we'll see you in the evening. All right, God bless and Maranatha.